new house, and fixing it up and all those things. So just having a place to go to that I know I can just truly rest and not have to worry about work, not have to worry about, house projects or anything else associated with that. And those two things, work and home, being such a big part of my life right now, and not having, I used to do hobbies and everything else, and those are, starting to dwindle down as those two things get bigger. Yeah, it's just the third place of my parents' house is just a great to go and spend time with them and be with family and get to relax a little bit.
I love that because you
Love
find
that.
solace in it, right? Like you find retreat in it. And so again, we're naming all of these things out loud. We're naming like calm, reset. We're naming solace, retreat, familiarity, greenery, activity. We're naming all of these things, and all of these things also exist in a school. When you think about it, kids, their third place can't be school because that's basically their job space, right? That's their second
It is.
space. Their first space is home, their second space is school. So when you think about all the things that we just named, how much more important is it for us to consider the subliminal messaging of our space? Because kids are there so dang long. They're literally there sometimes 8+ hours a day. So I'm just going to highlight taking from our espresso shot. So culturally responsive teaching in the brain has a section where it talks about culture. Culture, it turns out, is the way every brain makes sense of the world. So kind of how we're making sense of and we're attracted to our third places. And it kind of breaks culture down into surface culture, shallow culture, deep culture. Deep culture being like our ethnicity and geography and those like deep rooted sense of culture. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about in terms of physical space. We're talking about the surface culture and the shallow culture. So all of the associations that we're making in our physical spaces fit under the umbrella of surface and shallow culture. So whether I feel as though this is a place of retreat for me, that is a part of my surface culture, right? And as an educator, we should be able to acknowledge that and speak into that. Let's get into our next question. So, we talked a little bit about subliminal messages of the environment, but I really want to tackle what role does the environment have in communication? So Brady, I love the work that Purposeful Design does and the community that you're supporting. And we've talked previously just about a little bit about literally the role that the environment has in supporting those individuals. So I'd love for you to kind of speak to like the mission of Purposeful Design and then the role that environment plays in that mission.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wish you guys could see a little bit better, but purposeful design exists to employ and train folks coming out of really difficult situations like homelessness, addiction, and incarceration. We give the gift of work and a really incredible, stable job, and then set them on the path of rebuilding their lives through that gift of work. But one of the things that matters to us is that we have a really beautiful building here. We have a clean manufacturing facility. We make mostly solid wood products that is inherently just really warm and inviting. And our showroom is really beautiful. And we put a lot of money and effort into making it beautiful. One reason being, if someone was told, "Hey, come and spend time at this place where you can help kind of get back on your feet," and they walk into this sterile place where no one looks like they care about each other, and it's gross and whatever it is, like that doesn't communicate a whole lot of sense of welcome or a sense of belonging. So we take great pride in having an amazing facility, both like offices, showroom, manufacturing, so that people feel welcome. But then it also creates, the community and culture around that sense of belonging. Like
Yeah, right.
we want to be spending time here. We want to be doing life together and working together and sharing this experience and memories with one another while we're actively doing these things in this really cool space. So the space is incredibly important. It communicates so many things. Like we've got all the pictures of the guys that we've helped on the wall behind us. I mean, you walk in here and I wish I had a VR technology that I could take you around our facility, but there's quotes and encouragements all over the wall. There's pictures of projects that we've done in the past. There's beautiful furniture laid out everywhere. So yeah, space is important for us here at PD.
Yeah, it's welcoming. And
Love that.
I've been in schools before where they have like kind of how you described it, Brady, like a sterile, kind of like dirty, whatever environment.
Yeah,
And like school systems are large. It takes a lot to take care of them. We
yeah.
totally understand. At the same time, I have spoken to like groups of kids of various ages that when they receive leftover kind of broken down furniture and like broken down pieces from other places, what does that communicate, right?
Mhm.
Like what does that say? Like and when you ask some kids, some kids are super resilient. They'll be like, "Well, I mean, it's my desk." Or like, "Oh, well, it's like my chair." And thank God for your resilience. And then other kids are kind of like, "Well, it's like it's crap and like it's left over." Like people
Mhm.
will say it's left over. And so
Yeah,
the last thing you want, then all of a sudden you have like a group of second graders or eighth graders or high schoolers that they feel as though the only thing that they deserve is something left over and it doesn't actively work for them. So I love that. I love the idea of the space actively can help build the culture. Like
Mhm.
culture can't just be a top down, bottom up thing. It has to be a holistic. We
Yeah.
can't just like build. Imagine like going to, you're super excited. Adriana, I know we talked about like working in coffee shops, right? Like imagine like you're super excited to go work at this coffee shop and you walk in and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like it's like there's disheveled things, everything like they're like the sides of the tables are like peeling off and like everything. Like it just does it
exactly. Yeah.
make you want to sit down and work?
Not me being a germaphobe, right? Like, not
It
me. Yeah, it's
it
not
just
inviting. It doesn't feel, one, it just doesn't feel like a place where I can be professional in. I don't want to touch anything. I don't want to interact with any of the furniture in there. But it also puts a block on the people around me, right? Like if this is what your establishment looks like, what does your coffee look like? What does your
you sound
kitchen look
good.
like? What are your
What's your
employees like?
what's
So
your customer service?
exactly. So I imagine in a classroom it's the same, right? Like if everything just is broken down, or even if it's not broken down and it's leftover furniture, maybe it's just very metal and wood, hard, bright color, or like very stark white walls,
Yeah,
um, in a place that feels institutional. Um, it affects your brain and how you interact with your educator, with your facilitator, with your peers, with the people
yeah,
around you, and how you interact with your own brain, how you interact with
yeah.
yourself, and how you function throughout the day. I'm gonna want to, and this is gonna sound very strange, but I'm gonna want to take a nap in a place that feels institutional. I'm gonna want to not be, I shut down. I shut down
Yeah,
basically.
shut down. Yeah, I think that's like a really like the term shut down to use. Um, and some people get shut down by it and some people get royally revved up by it and like
You're right.
somewhere in between would be really nice. But like going back to this idea of communication and subliminal messaging and expression. So we have a graphic that's up that you can see, and it basically labels some of the roles and responsibilities of both your brain's hemispheres. So we have the right side of your brain and the left side of your brain. So the right side of your brain it is all intake. So it's intake, intake, intake. I'm receiving information, I'm digesting information, receiving. And the left side is responsible for sequencing all of that information, for creating associations, for intaking and cataloging facts. It's also a large part of your linguistic operations. So it's also known as the expressive side. So you have your intake side and your expression side. So my question for you, our first pour over moment, are you ready? Is at what age does the left hemisphere, your expressive hemisphere, become more actively responsive? So, at what age are you when the left side of your brain becomes more actively responsive? I'm not going to say turns on because it's always on, but I am going to say when does it become more active? So, I'm going to launch it. I'm super ready. It should pop up on everybody's screen. So, Adriana, Brady, I'm curious to hear your guesstimations. At what age does the left side of your brain turn on?
I'm gonna go with my gut choice that we spoke about. I think it's about 4 years old.
Okay, Brady, what about you? What do you think?
I'm gonna go much older, maybe the 20-year-old range.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, in a way, both of you are close. That's really strange. In a way, both of you are close. So actually, so executive functioning and that expressive part of your brain, it's not really fully solidified until you're between like 25 and 27. So we're still young pups in that consideration.
Yes, we are.
But the left side of your brain actually becomes more responsive between the ages of 6 and 9. So like second, third, that's when you talk to educators that teach third grade and they're
That makes
like,
sense.
they come back second semester and they go, I don't know what happened to my kids. I don't know what's
That
going
makes
on.
sense.
It's because there's like a switch that turns
Which
on and they become much more expressive. So saying things to younger ones like, just use your words. They're like, I can't.
I don't have words. I
I
don't have
don't
them.
have words. But also like taking that and connecting it to your environment. If a child, even up through like fourth, fifth, sixth, middle school, if they are feeling subconsciously uncomfortable in their space, being able to actively go through as the adult in the space and go through some criteria of these are all of the boxes that I need to be able to check so that the majority of people can be subconsciously comfortable in my space, right? So you labeled plants like biophilia 1,000%, up into through the 60s, everyone was like, well, schools need to be built without windows because it's distracting. Like, oh,
Yes.
okay. Hindsight, but then also like texture, temperature, lighting. I mentioned like I am not a big light person. It turns me
Same.
off to no end to be a big light person. So Adriana, I'm wondering if you could highlight just from like a design background, if you could highlight for us what are some things that educators can be actively mindful of when like checking off those boxes in their space? Like what are some things they can be paying attention to?
I mean, lighting is so important, right? Lighting, having the right lighting for learners to be able to actually see what they're doing, but not such an overwhelming light that it is messing with their function as far as like this is so bright that it hurts and I'm having to, because this used to happen to me. I used to have to do this and sort
Oh
of
my
cover
gosh.
my head a bit because it was so bright. This stark, very bright white or bluish LED light, or just bright lights in schools and then the walls and the floors, like the light bounced off of my desk, it bounced off of everything, and I ended up with headaches or I just couldn't focus on what I was learning because I was too focused on the light. So that's extremely important. And this goes all the way throughout, your workhood, right? Like when as
Right.
an adult where you're working your working space. Um, as a designer, I need to be able to see finishes and fabrics and colors the right way in the color that they're going to be in and whatever lighting they're going to be in.
Yeah.
But also just my day-to-day working needed to be a lot dimmer, as you mentioned for
Yeah.
you. I was fine with working in all lights off space because my monitor had everything that I needed. That doesn't
Right.
work for everybody, right? But being aware that lighting has a lot to do with how your space feels. A warmer light feels more welcoming than a bright white,
And bright
sterile,
start.
institutional light. And also just the colors that surround you. How are you going to feel in school? You don't want your learners, or even your littles to feel like they're not welcomed in the space or like it's a scary place. It's an institutional place. It's a place that I'm away from home. So you want to have colors that are calming, that feel
Right.
right for them, soft, which in the design world, what we would call spa colors. And it's spa colors for a reason, right? They're very calming, they're very soothing. Um, what we're used to seeing is very, very bright primary colors in school spaces. Yes, those can be energizing, those can be great, but they can also be very overwhelming for someone who is struggling with like sensory overload. And that doesn't need to be someone who has very, very intensive needs. That could be someone just like you and me, with ADHD, with a very low grade of autism, just sensory overload with very bright yellows and very bright reds.
Yeah.
And that could cause a lot of energy in moments where we need to be more focused, more in
Not,
tune
yeah.
with our facilitator.
Yeah. And I like that you highlighted like it works for me, but it might not work for everybody. So having like that,
Correct.
even in design, having differentiation. So having highlights and lowlights, like just freaking being able to adjust the lighting in the dang
Maybe
room.
dimming, yes.
Maybe it makes all or like suggested maybe we have lamps throughout the space. Like I've been in also learning spaces that
Yes.
incorporate things like a salt lamp or things like of that nature. Brady, I noticed that even in the background of your screen, there's differentiated lighting in the
Yeah.
space that you're in, right? So just that simple tweak, like in the design process, makes such a big difference. So it makes me think of this portion out of the text called Weird. If you've never read this book, please, oh my gosh, grab it. If you've ever felt weird in a space, like this book is for you, whether it's
All the
culturally
time.
weird, spatially weird, socially weird, whatever kind of weird, please grab this book. But I love what Olga says, like maybe you're trying to understand why your neighborhood, school, office, social circle is so homogeneous. Like there's no reason why we can't have good differentiation. It might make people feel a little less weird, like in their space. Um, okay, so how do we account for the physical environment throughout an academic year? Here's our next pour over question. I'm going to ask the question first before we discuss because I'm super curious to know people's responses. Here we go. How much time does an educator have at the beginning of the year, right? Beginning of the year, there's no kids yet. We're waiting for new kids. How much time does an educator have to set up their space at the beginning of the year? I'm going to release the poll, but please, 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 guys, what are you thinking?
One day.
1 week.
Ooh.
That just makes me cringe. Like even just like both of those answers just makes me cringe. Like 1 week, 1 day, I mean a month, chef's kiss. Whoever, I'm sorry,
That would be amazing.
this might be giving away an answer, but whoever has like 1 month to set up their space at the beginning of the year, chef's kiss to that school. Can you email us the name of the school that you work for? Um, okay. Ooh, okay. 1 week, several days.
Mhm.
I'm gonna share the results. Okay, 1 week, several days. Y'all are generous. What? No.
I was thinking 1 to 2
So,
days tops.
no, listen, let me just, so I did the only side quest deep dive to this question because, oh no, half that here, I'll show half. So basically, I went on a bunch of different teacher collab sites, right? Forums, and figured out who was having the conversation. So you have responses like 2 days, but most of that time is spent in pointless meetings. Facts, straight facts. 4 days, but our contract allows for 2.5 of them to be wasted in stupid meetings. At the end of June, my school has 8 required attendance days for setup, but that's required. So I would then like to share this little statistic. I'm gonna stop sharing and reshare so that some of the pictures pop up. But depending on if you're in a charter school, a straight public school, a private school, or an independent school, all of your planning time looks completely different. I worked in a charter school for years, and I kid you not, our back to work date, mid-July. Kids didn't come into the building until the end of August. What are we doing all that time, you ask? It's all
Meetings?
Summer Institute, PDs, professional, all these trainings, right? How long did I have to set up my room? Maybe a day. You're there for like 4 legit
Yeah.
weeks, maybe a day. And we're talking about all this differentiation, right? We're talking about all these things that we should be able to accomplish like for the new group of kids that I have, and being able to understand what they need and being able to navigate that in my planning process. So, all that to say, I found a staggering statistic of about educators and how much time they're spending outside of work for work. This is straight from the US Department of Education. 31%
Awesome.
of educators are using between 3 to 5 hours a week, you say? No, no, work day, as in the singular, to do work outside of work. So when you read responses like, well, my district has X contract hours for me to do that, I want to 99.9% of the time, educators and facilitators are setting up their space on non-contracted hours, which means they are not getting paid to do so. And I would say at least 75 to 90%, it's probably like closer to 100%, are purchasing items for their space out of pocket. So I'm not getting paid for these hours and I'm purchasing out of pocket. What? And another staggering statistic. The United Federation of Teachers, this is what they had to share. One sentence. Teachers must be given sufficient time to prepare their classrooms, which is usually at least half a day. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Okay, if you're like a specials teacher for high school, or like if you have one
Yeah.
area that you're used to being in, you're a specials teacher, you're a niche teacher, you're like that, you know what you need to set up. If you're talking to educators of various age groups, excuse me, so like Brady, I'm so like, how would you react if somebody comes in, right? I'm sure when, someone comes in and they start working, you have more than a half a day of orientation for them, no?
Yeah, it's a 3 week apprenticeship, so much more than a half a day.
And so you're
Yeah.
getting for 3 weeks, right? You're getting used to your space. Not
Hmm.
only like the people that you're trying to figure out how to navigate, but also the space that you're trying to figure out how to navigate. So this
Yeah.
is one of the reasons why educators end up setting up their space in the exact same way every year with the exact same tools and the exact same labels because they don't have time to make it different,
Yeah.
right? It's still that just blows my mind. So, considering all of this, we're gonna get into some cold brew moments. So, remember, guys, our cold brew moments are professional recommendations or pieces of advice for you to take with you throughout the rest of this work season. Um, a highlight that I would like to give. We are United for Growth Manufacturing, North Van Nuysville, and Pedagogy. We are currently underway with a very large pilot program in Long Island. And just to express the transformative opportunities that you have with your space, this is a drawing for an ICT room in a school district in Long Island. So ICT is integrated co-taught. It is a special education room. Kids have to receive a diagnosis and B, like a slate to attend this type of classroom. A family can't just say, well, I think they need to be in an ICT room. It has to be something that's been programmed for them. And it's usually ran by two educators. So we transformed this ICT space, and this ICT space is filled with a population called MLLs, which are multi-language learners, and they also have some emerging verbalists and some non-verbal children in their space, whether that's like selective mutism or some other type of cognitive glitch that does not allow them to be verbal. And after being in the space for a handful of weeks, they said that the space was so free flowing and light and airy and open that they noticed that kids were exploring their different spaces at different times of the day and verbally engaging with their peers and their facilitators. So what that kind of looks like is, if you notice, the space is kind of split in two. And in an ICT room, we do something called parallel teach a lot, where each educator takes groups of learners and they do the exact same thing in different ways on either side of the space. So you're doing it in parallel. And they started noticing that kids had the freedom, the internal freedom to move from which side of the room they wanted to learn on for that particular like parallel teaching moment. Nobody instructed them to do that. They just started doing it all on their own. So you have kids that can't express, I need dimmer light, I need solace, I need greenery. You have kids that they literally cannot express it or have difficulties. And just because of the spatial transformation, they're now moving more comfortably throughout the space and literally like talking. They're talking. I need to stop sharing for a minute. We changed the furniture and kids started talking. That literally blows my mind.
They read the room.
They they read the room. But Brady, it almost makes me think of, you shared with us like a beautiful anecdote about the comparison of like rough material goods and like a finished product. Could you share with everybody like that story? Because I think that's in tandem with this story. It's such an active indicator about like your space and your materials and subconscious messaging.
Yeah. One of the beautiful things about what we do, from a manufacturing standpoint and the type of product that we build from solid wood lumber, is that a lot of the folks that we serve actually see themselves in the process of building the thing that they're building. So they're pulling rough lumber. It's all different sizes and shapes and everything else. It weaves its way through planers and joiners and gets to this like really refined, like right size piece of lumber. It's smooth to the touch. It looks really beautiful. It gets joined together with other pieces of similar size and length and requirements and all those things, joined together to create this really beautiful table that's completely finished. And so, I mean, we've heard countless stories of guys literally saying it was like I was like picking myself off of the shelf and going through this refining process to get to the end point of a beautiful, beautiful table. They see themselves, not just themselves, but also themselves, like everyone else that's going through the process together as well, joining together, being, we use being pipe clamped together into this like amazing team that we have here at Purposeful Design, all kind of like gearing towards the mission of how do we grow this thing? How do we do really well ourselves, and then how do we do well collectively together so we can grow this thing that more people can be, involved in underneath us as well. So, yeah, lots of great parallels, and to use a woodworking trade or where a lot of dovetail, stories and messages coming together as well. Yeah.
I love that. And so it's such a visceral connection to the space, right?
Yeah.
So kids in that ICT room feeling so comfortable that they can actively work on expression. And then the adults in your space that are starting to feel so comfortable because of literally like the malleable pieces, the tangible pieces that they're working with, and like the flow of that which they're working.
And I'll say,
Adriana, yeah, go ahead, Brady.
one thing to when people start to feel comfortable in a space, then the interpersonal connections start to grow significantly. So one of the things is that it can't just be a space, because if cold people fill up a warm space, it's like the space can only do so much. So it's a both like a environment that you're in, but also the people that are joining it. And when you combine those two things together, where the space gives a sense of belonging, but the people that complement that's the secret sauce. This morning, in a meeting that we had, one of the guys shared that I've never been in a place where people smile at you. Never been in a place where people smile at you. It's
Makes
like
a huge difference.
gosh, I mean, at some point, it's like, who cares how great this looks? If we are not exuding the types of things that we believe and we're trying to set up, then none of this really matters, right? Like the environment communicates something, but the people are the one that back it up. So that's why it's so important. Like when I was hearing you talk about the students, is that the environment was set up so that the students can do the things that they need to do, but the teachers and everyone, as they're starting to build those interpersonal connections, they feel comfortable to actually live into that thing.
Yeah, you're so right. And shout out to them as educators, because kids are mad resilient, but the adults in the space, it's kind of like this ain't my first rodeo. Like I've been through this, and so sometimes it's really hard to go back to the basics and know like how much a smile does, how much like a quiet moment does, right? And shout out to those facilitators that saw the change happening and just watched, right? Did not interject, did not reprimand for switching, did not, but just like watched, right? If it's not harmful to yourself and it's not harmful to others, I want to see what's going on. And I think this, the same to you, Brady, and the team, like when people share those types of stories and their personal connection and their feedback, hats off also to the team for quietly absorbing, right? Because we literally have to go back to the basics.
Furniture, whatever it is, for hundreds of years. It reached a point where it was really popular, and then people were like, they got like the cherry scares where everything was like a dark red, and they were terrified of what that was going to look
Cherry
like.
scares.
Thankfully, the types of furniture and purposeful design, the types of products that we build are a lot more warm and inviting. So natural maple is really beautiful. Natural white oak are really beautiful. Maple being the indoor, it's a little bit more of an open pore wood. It's a little bit more cost effective. White oak being a closed pore and kind of used for a variety of more like limited outdoor types of scenarios. But it's all solid wood. It's really beautiful. It's durable and quality, and you can just tell when you sit down at one of these tables, like, man, this is just kind of what Hannah was saying earlier. Like the school has made a decision to put something quality in front of me. Like it's not only just a learning item. I mean, you look under the table and you can see plants growing and fish swimming around. Like I mean, I didn't have that. That's freaking cool. Um, but you can also just sense like the way that we build it, handmade, quality control, like all of that. You can just tell that it's a beautiful product. So
Well, and there's
It really
no,
is.
what I love about it, and we got just a couple minutes left, but Adriana, I'd love for you to touch on, like, what I noticed about it right away is there's no rough edges. There's literally no rough edges. Immediately, it's a softer piece. We can do a lot of technical nature-based activities in the piece, but it's such a soft, like, I want to go there. The A frame and the type of natural wood that's on the surface, like as a child, I can go and I literally can sit under the table and like watch things move and watch things grow. But I'm wondering, Adriana, if you could just talk to us a little bit about like the soft edge versus just like a hard edge, and like in the design process, kind of about angles and lines and like what that communicates.
I mean, it goes back to welcoming, right? Something that feels like home, with your school, which is an institution, is your kiddo's second place. Um, it has to feel, it should, not it has to, it should feel like home because it is their home away from home. The everything about the versatility of this table, quality wise is amazing. Yes, the A-frame, yes, the powder coating, yes, the different surfaces. All the surfaces, however, with the soft edges, one for safety. So probably good that there are no sharp edges on it. Um, but it's inviting. So many people walked around this table at our booth at Ed Spaces and were drawn to it. They walked the entire booth and they just were drawn to this table, whether that be because they were, paying attention to the materials and how beautiful the table is, or they were touching those edges. They were running their hands across the surface. They were touching the oak board to just look at it because it's such a beautiful, warm color. Um, it's inviting. They
Yep.
were looking at El Jefe. They were looking at our little tree. They were wanting to touch the dirt. It's, you know, your tactile sensory, like touching this table, and it not being just your plain square edges, square legs, a typical metal table. It made such a difference with the different
Yeah.
shapes. But then, with that said, the versatility of it, how many options this can be used for, whether you use the marine
Yeah.
grade resin board or the oak, or the maple, which is fully interior
That's my
surface,
favorite.
right?
Plug for the maple. That one is beautiful. It's so nice. I can't.
Oak for me,
It
Oh,
white oak is my favorite
what
material, but there's so many uses for this table, for this piece of furniture, which I mean, it could be used for art, it could be used for science, it could be used for hatching eggs. Hannah, you have a project where someone wants to hatch eggs
yeah.
in it.
Incubation. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Brady,
it's
you got,
because of the shape and the materials.
yeah. Oh, 100%. And
It just draws you to
Brady,
it.
You got excited when I said maple. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just gonna say, the best way that I like to describe it is like Scandinavian, right? Like the warm, like natural, the warm solid wood tones
Yeah.
look almost like that Scandinavian, like European, as opposed to like maybe some of the solid wood products that we've seen coming out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
I'm gonna carry that phrase, the cherry scaries. I'm gonna put
Oh yeah.
well, thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. There's so many aspects of this conversation that we could go down rabbit holes for hours on. But ultimately just an agreement upon like your physical space communicates subliminal messages. And depending on how old you are or your experiences or your associations, those messages are always going to hit you differently. And so just the importance of, taking into consideration those messages when you're designing a learning space and any space for that matter.